welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, June the 26th, our last show of the month, the first show of this summer, and as Walter just said, the days are getting shorter. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack show, and we talk about the issues of the day, etc. So I'm going to start off with the flooding in Calgary. What can you say? I mean, we are on the edge of absolute disaster. We're seeing record flooding, huge flooding in Europe over the last month. The forest fires are getting worse. The droughts are getting crazier, and yet throughout it all, we can't change. It's like watching the human race commit suicide, and it's very disappointing.
Well, you know, and I was thinking, okay, in the mainstream coverage, how many times you're going to hear the words climate change. And in fact, it did happen, and particularly the CBC coverage, and they gave it a fair amount of profile. But of course, the framing of how they introduced the topic was like, this is the new norm. Just come to accept that these big storms are going to be happening, and don't really look in depth at carbon emissions and all the other human activity that may be exacerbating the issue.
Not exacerbating the issue, maybe it is causing the issue.
At best.
Yeah.
But in the end, though, it is a matter of how the story is being framed. And what I really noticed was that it's a story about camaraderie and community and all that, which is an important story. But to me, it seems to be like a diversionary approach to the issue, and not really looking at, the root causes to it.
Yeah, so the root cause, in my opinion, and probably in your opinion too, is that because we have burnt over the past many decades and really centuries so much fossil fuel that we've actually changed the makeup of the atmosphere. And as scientists have been predicting for decades now, what is happening because of the amount of carbon dioxide and other gases we're pumping into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide acts as a blanket, and just as when we put a blanket over top of us, it tends to warm the earth. And I remember decades ago reading that the initial things we would see as the earth begins to warm are more extreme weather events, more flooding, more fire, more drought. Things would just go to extremes. And that's, in fact, what we're seeing. And as you said, they frame the story as, well, this is what we've got to deal with. There's no talk about reduction. I mean, it's like let's continue to kill ourselves.
I think the other part of it, particularly, that my heart goes out to all the people that have suffered, and they're working folks living and trying to get by in Alberta, in the heart of the petroleum industry and all that. And most of the people affected, by the way, do not have insurance. That flood insurance is quite a rare thing to have. So it's going to be a lot of individuals and businesses that have received a catastrophic blow. And many businesses do fail after these types of events. Sometimes up to 30% of the businesses in a region will never reopen after a catastrophe. All the small businesses, particularly all the storefront owners, all the the small service industry, a lot of those companies don't have the capital, just simply can't withstand the battering and will go bankrupt. So it's a financial blow for the people of that region, and it's very, very serious. And I've not heard yet, and I was really hoping to hear the Alberta government step up to bat and say, okay, this is a natural disaster, and these people do deserve to have support, and the government should step in there and provide support.
The Alberta government has said they're going to kick in $1 billion.
Hopefully that will cover it.
Huge chunk of money. But this is only the beginning, and it's now irreversible. Climate change is irreversible, assuming we're right. I mean, there are those who say that, that it's all, climate change has got nothing to do with people. It's, whatever. And, that's fine. They can say that. But it seems to me and to many, many other people that there is a direct link between what we are doing, the burning of fossil fuels. We have the most inefficient, stupid, wasteful transportation system in the world. I mean, just step outside and watch it go by. People, one person driving the car, 3,000 pounds of steel and plastic.
That's right.
Pumping fuel into the atmosphere for what? For what? What we need is a superb public transportation system that is clean, quiet, comfortable, safe, and I've basically stopped ever taking the bus. I really don't enjoy taking the bus. They're noisy. There's always somebody on with a radio. I don't want to listen to somebody else's music. There are rules on the bus, but there's no enforcement of any rules. So, it's not fun to drive a bus while the guy in the car is cruising by in air-conditioned comfort. You're standing in the rain waiting for a bus where you can get on and not have a good time. It's possible to have a good, safe, clean, quiet transportation system, so our government should get on with doing that.
Well, really, the number one thing to make a public transportation system efficient is you have to have the population base to support it. And in order to do that, you should allow densification to occur in cities where there is already services there, streets and streetlights and sidewalks and sewage and all the rest. There should be an acceptance that these areas are going to have more dense populations, taller buildings, and basically more people demanding transportation. When you have that, of course, you can have public transportation that's quite efficient and is supported by the ridership. You don't have to have a huge subsidy from the government to do that.
And if public transportation was better and more comfortable, more convenient now, more people would be using it. I've heard people call the buses loser cruisers, right? And you know what? When you're on the bus, that's often the way it seems. I don't, who wants to be on it? It's not pleasant, and we can do better, and we should do better. I mean, I think it's deliberate that we don't. Anything more on climate change?
Well, we could go on about that, but I think talking about Alberta is very, very important right now because hopefully a certain percentage of those people in Alberta will come to the conclusion, yes, we're in an era of climate change, and start demanding in their own government to act accordingly,
I had a flooded basement several years ago, and it was not pleasant. It's a mess.
Yeah.
And, people are going to be really paying a price, and not only a money price, but in many other respects. People are out of their homes. Where are they staying? What's going on? All of that. A couple of days ago, this is being filmed on June 26th. A couple of days ago, I went to the CRD open house for sewage. It was about sewage treatment. They now have two possible locations for where they're going to put the sludge plant, and people could go and say, I want this one, which is in Esquimalt, or I want this one, which is in Heartland. And somebody pointed out the very interesting fact that there was no option C on that, and option C being, this whole idea is stupid, let's cancel it all and start looking from step one again at what we're doing here. And I really want to say especially to the politicians who are on the CRD, that the whole process, the open house process, is a disgrace. It's a disgrace to democracy. The open houses are always set up, not only on this issue, but always set up not to find out what the public wants, but to manipulate us into doing what has already been decided, I guess, by our betters, the elected representatives, and the staff. And I really don't know what happens. We elect people to our city councils, our school boards, the CRD, But it seems that so often, instead of representing us, another agenda is in place, and their job becomes to convince us to follow somebody else's agenda. And if they can't convince us, then too bad. They just jam it down our throats and walk right over us. It's bizarre.
It is. It's part. One could say it's maybe human
Nature.
behavior. But I don't really buy into it. I think there's something fundamentally missing in our psyche and in our societies, and it really does boil down to some very, very basic concepts about who we are as individuals and what our rights are, and what politicians, once they're elected, we seem to lose touch with these basic core values of what's important about our communities. And it really gets to a point where I don't think they're all phoning each other up every night and telling, going over the agenda again on how they're going to manipulate the public into accepting the sewage treatment plant. But there is a shared ideology that they just seem to so easily fall into, which they believe, as you say, that we know better. We just have to just explain this to these not too bright, the public that isn't too bright about this, that we really do know what we're talking about. And unfortunately, most of the time they don't. Usually these are fiascos. And the sewage treatment plant is absolutely a fiasco, start to finish, financially, environmentally, in terms of process and democracy. It's just another example of that ideology just run amok.
And yet it moves ahead step by step, month by month. We're getting closer to probably the signings of the first contracts. And, once contracts are signed, we're talking about probably close to $1 billion in a community of 300,000 people to do something that it seems the science says is going to be environmentally damaging. I used to be a strong supporter of sewage treatment, and I still am if it makes sense. But from what I've heard over the past few years, the type of plant that they're going to build is not going to help the overall environment. It's going to move some of the problem out of the water and onto the land. It's going to be extremely expensive to do that, and the end result on land may be worse than what we were doing into the water. So it just seems wrong. And yet, whose agenda? I spoke to somebody from the CRD and said, what is public opinion on this? Does the public want to go ahead with this plan, or do we want a complete rethink? And they didn't seem to know. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. Why don't our politicians know what the public wants? Because isn't that what they're supposed to be doing, what the public wants? But that doesn't even seem to be in the game. If I could say one thing to all of our elected representatives, municipal, CRD, school boards, it would be, don't trust your staff people. Don't trust your senior staff people until you have seen time and again that they are worthy of that trust, and that they are honest and working in our interest, because the senior staff often seem to have an agenda that is completely different than the agenda of the people of the city. And it's not a good thing when that happens.
No, absolutely. I mean, going way back to the Water District days, and you remember our first affiliations with the CRD around the raising of the Souk Dam and all the problems that occurred there. And I think that's where most of your education probably happened, around how the CRD works, which is profoundly undemocratic structure in itself. One that seems to work quite well for those empire builders, which I call the empire builders in the CRD, that want just huge infrastructure projects. If they're not cost effective, all the better, because the pressure will be on to privatize, and then the government will fall into line and give away the assets for very little, and then a private corporation can move in and manage our water or our sewage, and in a few years we'll be paying 2 or 3 times what we used to pay. That's the model, and I think the staff of the CRD fit right into that. They, as far as they're concerned, that's a good way to go.
Yeah. So what has to happen is something has to change, because we keep talking about the problems. We're always talking about the problems, but nothing changes. And I really think we need fundamental change. We need democracy.
We need accountability, right down through the ranks. Where's the accountability in all the decision making around the sewage treatment? How do you really nail it down exactly who is making these decisions? And was there ever a mandate really for them to make such a monumental decision without some type of a referendum or a public consultation process, a real one?
And my understanding is that when the provincial government said that they were going to force us into doing this sewage treatment plant, as part of the legislation, they removed any hope for a referendum. That was because in the past there has been on this kind of issue, but the provincial government took that off the table. I think it's increasingly clear that our system of government is not working. It's almost like we need something above the government.
We need a government that looks after the government. But the thing is that we're trying to solve it structurally, I think, is always going to be a problem, Jack, because we have the same sort of individuals getting elected. I see it time and time again. You have somebody that really comes up through the grassroots and really is looking out after the public. It's a huge struggle for that person to get elected without compromising. And once they are elected, and I've seen this happen, they're ostracized. In the school board, seen it happen where those who are the corporatists on the school board are just went after anybody that's progressive. Really being cruel and doing things that really aren't fair.
Let's say, for example, we had somebody like the Auditor General, our past Auditor General, who's John Doyle.
Correct.
Recently, I guess, removed by the Liberal government, has done great work for us, just great work. Even some has been in the media, but he's done even better than that.
Yeah.
If we had somebody in a position like that was overseeing the government in terms of how, for example, it manages, how the parties manage themselves, to make sure that they follow their own rules, that they follow their own bylaws and their own constitution, so that when leaders are chosen, people are not going up and signing up hundreds of members who will never do anything except perhaps vote on this one thing. And in fact, where the leadership candidates themselves, it seems, maybe even paying the amount of money that's necessary for the membership, that kind of stuff has got to be wiped out. And if we change the rules so that, for example, let's say instead of Adrian Dix picking all the critics for the NDP in opposition, and instead of Premier Clark picking the cabinet, shouldn't it be that the caucus, for example, of the Liberal Party picks the cabinet? That way the cabinet has a lot more freedom to do something, because when Christy Clark picks it, she is completely in control. She has the powers of a dictator, and that is the fundamentally opposite of what's needed for democracy.
You often see that some people are put into those portfolios that are really beyond their depth, and they really don't know how to handle those files. And in my view, often that's the case where the premier or the prime minister is doing it on purpose because they want to control the file themselves, and they want to put a minister in there that's basically going to comply to whatever their wishes are.
Maybe just a few words about the NSA. Edward Snowden, currently in Russia as this is being filmed, or so we're told. it's amazing that now the truth seekers and truth tellers have to flee from the United States
Yeah, and
to
to go to Russia.
in order to maintain their freedom. What has happened to the United States? It is an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
And, you know, people, the Americans should stop singing their national anthem, the land of the free and the home of the brave, because it's been taken away from them.
It is an absolute joke. And you know, all this data collection, you know, it's got to such a wild level that our lives are being monitored 24/7. And we're just in this era where it seems to be legitimate that a foreign government can monitor my activities, and the Canadian government's just sort of shrugs.
And all because of 9/11.
Because of 9/11.
And when you go back to 9/11, you have to say, who was really behind 9/11?
Yeah.
Was it,
Yeah.
was it the corporations, or was it Osama bin Laden? We've just got a bit of time left. Walter, you're going to be doing the third segment of the show today, and it's going to be an interview. Maybe you can just tell us what's up.
We've had Janice Hoffman on before, and she's a grandmother of a student in the Souk district that is electro-hypersensitive, and that means a child responds very poorly when in environments where there's high electromagnetic radiation, such as that emitted from Wi-Fi routers. And Janice and another family have joined together with an action that they are bringing to the Ministry of Education, or Ministry of Health, rather. And
we're going to hear all about it.
We'll hear all about it in a little while.
Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.